Hello. Yeah, I'm Mike Talks, and I feel a little bit about the introduction there because I'm like, how much of that am I going to answer? Yeah, we are going to look at meetings, do a bit of a deep dive, look at the anatomy of what makes a good meeting and some things you really need to get your head on. Why am I here? To talk to you about why facilitation is an undervalued skill that testers need to develop. Let's talk a little bit about who I am. Well, you might know me from Twitter as TestSheepNZ. As mentioned, I've put a book together about how to test, all about introducing people new to the career of testing, but focusing on the kind of things that they'll be doing in their day-to-day in their first year. I use it a lot. I've just had 3 of my junior testers graduate to become intermediate testers. So that's been a really great experience to see how much people have grown. I've been in the industry now for about 25 years. As you can imagine, in that time, evolving in role, evolving in what I do, picking up kind of wrangling meetings has been a relatively new thing in the last 10 years. And I think we all kind of are used to having a mug or a tea towel or even a t-shirt, or even just perpetuating a meme that says something like, "I survived another meeting that should have been an email." We do not like emails. As much as testers don't like emails, developers seem to have an absolute aversion to them, like it was garlic and they were vampires. Yeah. I'm going to tell you today that you've got it all wrong. Are you ready to kind of embrace this? Well, I'm going to have to convince you a bit. Let's start first of all, by thinking what most people think is a good meeting. So probably go something like this. What I like to call the rubber stamp meeting. So we get into a room and somebody starts off with a, "Well, I think we should do the thing." And the other party goes, "Yeah, let's do the thing. We booked half an hour meeting for this. 28 minutes of your life back. Great meeting, everyone." That's what we consider to be a good meeting. Now, while we agree that disagreement is bad, sometimes having a bit of conflict and a bit of challenge to each other helps us to dig into a problem much deeper. And I'm going to talk a little bit in a moment about the kind of when you should be having a meeting. But we generally, going back to that thing, a meeting that should have been an email, we think resolving things by email is a great solution. That's probably because we're the IT industry and we think technical skills are good, soft skills like running meetings are bad. I have seen email threads that have gone on and on and on and on and on for weeks at a time, with bits coming through, with people replying at different points, and it becomes an absolute messy thread. And it still goes on. My favorite, by the way, was the email where we emailed a client. They emailed us, putting an action on us to respond. We emailed them back saying, "Here's the information we have. It's next with you." And for some reason, that email got blocked by their firewall. So we went away for a month going, "No, we're waiting for them to respond to us. We think they're responding to us." Yeah, so a meeting just allows you to do everything in real time, which can be really handy when it's something really important. A good facilitation, a good meeting helps you dig into a problem and kind of outline a framework for responding to it. There's been a bit of investigation into this. Matthew Sayed, in his book Rebel Ideas, which is one of my recommended readings, says, when we get a room full of people who are all very familiar with each other, we feel very comfortable with decisions. We make really fast decisions. Put someone who is slightly different into the mix, and it challenges us, and it means that it challenges kind of things that our assumptions that we've made. And they've run tests on this because, you know, everything is a test. How do you test something like this? Well, they've done something like putting a group of people who are all friends together in an escape room, and they really struggle. Just putting one person in that's not familiar with everyone will say things like, have you looked? Have we checked? Have we? And those things help to deliver to solve the problem a little bit faster. So facilitator's role from a country that's known for its sheep is essentially trying to guide a meeting, not being the meeting, guiding the meeting, making sure everyone gets to speak, ensure that people aren't talked over, and give prompts when you need to. So my aim for the end of this meeting is to flip the script and help you to understand why meetings are your friend at getting stuff done. I'm going to start with a definition, because a definition can help a little bit, particularly because what we'll do during this talk is we're going to pick out a few things, and they will become basically our heads up display of here. If we measure against this, then we help to deliver what's a good meeting. So the definition I went through, and gosh, there were so many. A gathering of two or more people that has been convened for the purpose of achieving a common goal through verbal interaction. So there's several things here. Two or more people who are the right people. That's been convened for the purpose of achieving a common goal. What's the common goal? And through verbal interaction, so that we are interacting. So those three things, solving how that's delivered, helps to deliver a good meeting. In IT, so most of our meetings should tend to revolve around problems, explorations. It's the nature of the game that we're in. And what I often find is, particularly with a guy I work with, would try and find a process for dealing with any problem that come, and would try and find a one-size-fits-all thing. It would be nice. It would be nice if one size fits all. And either you go light and it doesn't really handle when things get complicated, or you go complicated and it makes simple things a pain. One framework that I found really helpful for my thinking is the Keynote framework. I've pronounced that correctly. It was developed by Dave Snowden, and it's a sense-making framework that I find very handy when I'm looking at problems to try and work out, well, what should I do? I'm not going to go into a lot of detail here. I'm not going to teach you Keynote, but it's just simply this idea that there are clear problems which are pretty simple to solve, complicated problems that need a little bit of skill, and complex problems which I'm not so sure. Now I'm just really going to focus, just because it helps, on the difference between a simple and a complex problem. So, a simple problem, is something that doesn't need much expertise or understanding. So I have a remote control here. So if your remote control stops working, or your petrol is running low on fuel, or you tend to just don't have to do much thinking about that. Replace the battery, fill it up with petrol. It's not like you need to be skilled to do these things. I hope no one would take a remote control into a computer repair place saying, will you replace the batteries? It should be a fairly simple item. Generally, what defines a simple problem is it's something that happens a lot. It's fairly easy to diagnose. It's fairly easy to fix. Yeah. And certainly within my week in IT, that a few of those come through, and they are probably the classification of, okay, for something like this, an email, an instruction is probably all you need. There's a spelling mistake on a website. Where that content is created is through a content generation thing that loads of people got access for. You just then go in there, you change it in there, hit commit, and then immediately it kind of ripples through. That's probably not something you need an email about. Complex problems, though, don't play by the same rules, and this is where you definitely need a meeting. It's likely that, unlike simple problems, you've probably never encountered them before. And you'll need some kind of exploration to even understand what is going on. Doesn't it sound like every single defect we raise? Yeah. There might be an issue on a number of systems, and across a number of systems, no one's expert at them all. Okay, so we've made a decision. We've got a complex problem. We'll talk about some examples in a minute. So we've decided we're going to have that meeting. Let's look at some examples. We got a problem. How many times do I get this as testing? Is the problem the front end and what we're looking on a website, or is the problem all the way at the back end? Yeah. How do we find out? That could be a meeting. This, I know, was one of the things that was on our list. How do we test this? You know, a design document, a set of requirements arrive, and it's like, oh, I'm with you, Jackie Chan. How do we test this? Yeah. Or it could be during our performance testing, we're losing responses to our funding requests. And it's almost like a drawing room mystery. Who is to blame? Which area is to blame? Is it Mrs. White, the network engineer? Is it Colonel Mustard, the infrastructure architect? Is it Miss Scarlett, the application developer? So let's look at the definition. And particularly, we are going to zoom in on achieving a common goal. What is that goal? Well, we've had 3 examples. We're actually going to pick up with the one about the, let's go back a second. Losing responses to funding requests during performance testing. That's the one I decided to go with. So first of all, having the meeting, we need to define the agenda. Why is an agenda important? I can be a little bit tricky with people. When people put through a meeting with me and I don't find their agenda, I can be a little bit like, I need to know why I'm attending this, what the problem is, and indeed, am I even the right person to be at this meeting? Yeah. So setting that common goal, setting out what people what we're going to talk about, what we're going to explore is really key with the IT industry. Let me tell you, in 25 years, I have seen a lot of non-agendas. Yeah. So I don't even know what we're going to be covering off. Setting an agenda is really important. So people know what to expect. It sets the tone. It lets people be prepared. And most importantly, it sets a roadmap ahead for your problem. Importantly, and we've probably done this a few times. We've definitely experienced it. If someone tries to take the conversation away from your agenda, you can say, okay, we need to park that for later, or it needs to become its own thing.
Daha öncesinde havacılık, bankacılık, telekomünikasyon, perakende, e-ticaret gibi farklı sektörlerde yazılım test mühendisliği ve yöneticiliği yaptım.
Do we tell Goncha that she needs to probably mute her mic? Don't worry about it. We've all been there. It's the wonders of Zoom. Funny enough, we'll be talking about that in a minute. The importance of online meetings. If you're not talking, probably to mute yourself, because it definitely happens. Don't worry about it, Goncha. So what the agenda? We've all been in a meeting where we're here to talk about a problem, and somebody wants to talk about a completely different problem. And probably with my British bluntness, it's like, well, get your own meeting. This meeting is to cover something completely different. And if you've got time, maybe you can go back to it. But mainly it's like, okay, that's something, but that is not the purpose of this meeting. Yeah. And having that agenda to go, this is what we're covering, not this, can be really, really important to just hold the focus. And this is where we start to get into the groan zone when that happens. You know, another meeting that should have been an email, because we've all turned up to talk about something and somebody wants to talk about something completely different and probably irrelevant, probably should be its own people. But you know what? That agenda hasn't been set down. The audience has not been selected, you know, and it's off topic. So not today. And that's all you need to set. You need to do. You need to remind people this is not what the purpose of this meeting. You should pick it up, but we're not picking up on it here. Yeah. So we've got our purpose. We've been very clear about communicating that. So meeting, we're now focusing on the 2 or more people. That's really key. Who are the right people? Try not to keep banging on the desk. Who are the people required? Think about who you need. You've probably heard the phrase, the three amigos. I'm going to introduce it as a concept. I don't think the concept fits everything, but the basic idea is you need three people who come at this from a very different point of view. One of the problems with the three amigos is they all look very similar. I guess they have slightly different skills in the film, but they're all three cowboys, and maybe you want something a bit more than three cowboys, and we'll talk about that later. But the idea that George Dinwiddie introduced was you need a range of people across a problem area. He talks about if you mix a business person, a developer, and a tester, you kind of get a mix together of looking at a product differently. The developer is talking about, okay, how do I build this? How do I build this? Tester is thinking, well, how do I check this? But the business person is saying, well, what will the customer say? And you explore a problem in a bit more of a deeper way. We'll talk about this in a minute. Now, the right people, I'm sorry, I'm not going to give you a formula, but the right people will depend on the problem. Yeah. This is echoed, like I said, in a few case studies from the basics of Matthew Sayed's Rebel Ideas. We often form easier decisions in groups of sameness, and I'm going to demonstrate this, but often rude decisions because they're fundamentally flawed by the lack of diversity. So let's look at those lost responses. So imagine this triangle is our problem space, yeah? All the different things that you could know and explore about this problem. So we're losing responses on the performance tests. So I am going to, for several of these, I'm going to invite three people. So I'm going to start by having three app developers, yeah? And we'll look 1, 2, 3 at the problem, and their understanding of the whole system kind of clusters around just the application, yeah? And, you know, from the application developer's point of view, it's probably an infrastructure or a network problem. Okay, let's go and talk to network engineers and see what they say. Well, they come back with 1, 2, 3. Okay, they've looked at it thoroughly from there, and they are pretty sure it's not a network problem. It's probably an app or an infrastructure problem. Well, this is going nowhere. Maybe the infrastructure engineers will throw some light on it, and 1, 2, 3, their understanding of what's there, it's all clustered in an area. And they tell me it's probably an app or a network issue. Well, we're no further to finding the solution, aren't we? Let's see what happens when we mix together an application, a network, and an infrastructure person. 1, 2, 3. Suddenly we've got, through just mixing the different skills together, we're exploring the problem space more. There's still gaps, yeah? There's still gaps, and those gaps might be important, but maybe we can work towards exploring them, yeah? If we don't have fruit. And we can challenge each other, going, look, I know it's not the app because I'm seeing this, yeah? And someone else goes, and okay, but this is what I'm seeing as well. And it helps you to put together the clues, help kind of draw a conclusion. So, yeah, how do you know that you've invited the right people? The three amigos, a dev, business, and tester is an easy tick box. In truth, problems are difficult to categorize ahead of time. Your meeting will always be very context dependent. And for a starter, you know, reach out to your team. See if they say, oh, you should probably invite someone else. You probably should invite someone else. I put together the slides of this and I was feeling really good about myself. And I went, So I've got my apps developer and my network engineer, and I've got my infrastructure engineer. We're tech people, and we're going to explore this. And pretty much like the three amigos, I'm like, probably we need a business person, because the business person is going to want to know, okay, so under load, What does the customer say? And do you know what? We're so busy looking at the root cause of the problem, we're forgetting about the customer, and the customer probably matters, yeah? So they would want to know, what would the customer experience with lost packages be? Would it be that they get charged, but they don't get credited? Would it be that they don't even get charged and it just tells them, please try again later? Two completely different experiences. And it's just like me drawing up that meeting, guess who I forgot? We are fallible. Okay, so we know what the problem is. We've invited the right people. So last focus is through verbal interaction. Verbal, potentially, there are ways that you can interact apart from verbal, but that real-time interaction is really important. That's why we don't do emails. A little bit of etiquette can go a long way, and I feel terrible because it might feel like I'm calling out someone, but meetings can be in emotive places. With a little bit of etiquette can go a long way. Yeah. Things like, if it's online, this is what we learned in the first week of the pandemic. Turn off your microphone when you're not speaking. I have a very strict rule on my desk, by the way. I always have my microphone about 1/2 meter from my speaker. You can't see them there, but that's to prevent that awful feedback. Yeah. It's your role as a facilitator in a meeting to try and make sure that you, first of all, you set expectations and you try really hard to make sure everyone is heard. If you're expecting passions, it's really helpful to set expectations. Asking people not to interrupt one another can be really important, particularly when someone will sometimes just speak really loudly and talk over other people. I find, particularly with different cultures that I work with, some people are more ready to talk over people than others, and just kind of setting that expectations. Yeah, with an online meeting, it can be helpful for people to all mute their microphones or to raise a hand, so you can get to them as needed. It might be important. You also have to champion people, particularly people. Sometimes the quieter people are the most important voices to hear. And if you hear someone start to say something, find a pause and say, okay, Matt, you were starting to talk about something. What was that? And kind of return to them. Even so, it can feel a little chaotic. Yeah. We've all been to meetings like this where it feels like borderline chaos. We all want that meeting that we talked about at the front, the two Chads saying, I think we should do the thing. Agreed. We just want to turn to meetings that turn up and agree. We have an agenda. We know the problem. We've invited the right people. We launch with okay, how are we going to solve this? And it feels like we should constantly be driving towards a solution. So why does the first 10 minutes always feel a bit like chaos? Well, would it challenge your mindset if I told you it's supposed to? This is a diagram that changed my life. When I started to lead more meetings in 2014, Johanna Rothman recommended to me Sam Kainer's Facilitation Guides to Participatory Decision Maker. I hate the title. It's a mouthful, but it's a fantastic book. And it revolutionized my thinking to meetings. I expected we'd turn up with, okay, we have this problem, here's the solution, and we'd work towards it and kind of slowly agree. Yeah. Only for often we'd be quickly shot down. We might even have two solutions where we would both be slot down, and we'd start to do this thing, this diversion. We just seem to drift further apart as people started talking and exploring. Yeah. And I was horrified at this, but it turns out that this phase is relatively normal. We diverge, we explore the problem a little bit more. We've got different people in here, they're asking questions. And in most meetings, there will be like this tipping point where we start to explore, we get more information, and we'll often kind of start flipping towards a convergence. Yeah. I tend to keep an eye on the time, and when we're about halfway through the meeting, I will actually start thinking about, okay, so how do we move towards a solution? And sometimes that's all we need, that nudge. We need to do that. And sometimes what we need to do is we might need to get more information. But what we drive towards here is saying, okay, let's start to try and form some actions. Yeah. But on the way there, it's really important to kind of remember that sometimes we talk to each other and don't really get what people are saying. You know, people will talk about this or that. One of the most powerful tools I've seen in physical meetings is whiteboards, just to explain, draw a quick diagram. It doesn't have to be a good diagram. I don't know why everyone thinks it should, to explore a problem and just make it really visible. And like I said, a picture is worth 1,000 words. Driving towards actions is really the tipping point. Kind of gathering everything that's been said. It's really helpful to make notes as you go. Some people will say you've got something wrong, and that's okay, because that's really helpful for you to kind of get that clarification. If you've got it slightly wrong, somebody else will. It's good at this point to lead with phrases like, so where do we go from here? Or what's our next action? We might not have a solution by the end of the meeting, but there's things that people can look at and get back to you, and you can follow up on things. It's really important to build that list of actions, and it's really important as well to make sure that each action has one owner, yeah? So that when you meet up again, you're like ready for it. It's like, okay, the amount of times that I've been to meetings where there's actions but not owners, and we come back and it's like, oh, I thought you were doing that. No, I thought you were doing it. Yeah, it's really important to have clarity of, you were going to look at this, you were going to look at this log, you were going to look at something else. And finally, everyone gets to go, and you've got your little pile of notes, and it really helps to do a follow-up email about what people have discussed, particularly the action, so people remember what they're supposed to be doing, and probably sending a follow-up meeting where you go and you pick up, but you use those actions as your agenda for the next thing. So you pick up where people have gone, and it helps you to kind of, you know, sometimes you'll have to do a pass on this, like as a meetings, maybe 3 or 4, each time moving closer and closer to that goal, but you are getting there. You're clear, people are following up, and you are making it. So why you? First of all, let's talk about when it shouldn't be you. I have really strict rules about this. If there's a meeting or a problem and I need to talk, I am not going to be the facilitator. The facilitator is not there to talk. He's there to make sure, he or she is there to make sure that other people get to talk, and it follows kind of an orderly manner and has some structure. When you feel there's something you've got a lot to speak about, that's probably, right, Jane, I need you to pick up this meeting to facilitate, because there's a lot I need to say, and I can't both be the person with stuff that needs to be said and also the facilitator. The good news is, if you just apply everything I've taught you, the bar in IT is kind of incredibly low, yeah? Given by the fact that there are memes and cups and t-shirts talking about how badly meetings are run, and it was another meeting that should have been an email. If I've done my job, you'll be throwing that cup away. And as testers, we are used to talking to everyone. We don't actually do a lot, really. And the fact that we never fix the issues that we find, the power of what we do as testing is we communicate to people what we've done and where we found problems. And that is our real superpower, yeah? If we do that communication well, somebody knows what to go away to do and to explore, yeah? So we're used to talking to everyone, from the business to developers to the infrastructure people. We should always be talking to our team, first of all, about how we planned test features, you know, particularly when stories come through. There should always be a conversation. Sometimes we should be leading that about, here's what I'd like to test. Can anyone give me any ideas that we need to do more? We need to kind of sometimes be the point people about saying, okay, what's the acceptance criteria for this story? You know, what does good look like? What, you know, what should we be checking here? We should be driven to try, inspect, and adapt things, which is a great mindset to bring to meetings, especially when there are unknowns. The question, how could we find out, is your biggest friend. And would you surprise it? Would you be surprised that that's essentially it? There's a lot more you could learn, but you know, like I say, the bar is really low, and just following those kind of basics kind of put you well ahead of the curve. There is 2 books I recommend to you as reading. First of all is Matthew Sayed's Rebel Ideas, The Power of Thinking Differently, which is all about how diversity and different skill sets help to really explore a problem. I'm taking a drink first before I do this. The second one is Sam Kainer's Facilitator's Guide to Participatory Decision Making, which is a hell of a mouthful, but a great visual book. I've got one here. I'm trying not to sound like an advert, but it's an actual physical book, and it's all full of, you know, we were talking about how diagrams really help you, but nice little diagrams explaining some of the process. So, in summary, I'm telling you, if you want to take the reins for this, and you should, start by defining the problem and setting the agenda, of course. Make sure you invite the right people. Don't be afraid to ask for feedback. You will get feedback. Set and uphold etiquette so that the meeting can function well. And take pauses to summarize what you're hearing. This is a really powerful tool. Let people explore the problem initially. Don't feel that, you know, if when people are starting to drift, that the meeting is losing its focus. Exploring a problem initially is really important. Get people to draw when you can, and then you know, pretty much like I say, from the halfway point, start thinking about with a closure or with a exploration mindset and saying, well, what's the actions that we need to do to look at this again? And finally, so you don't waste that half hour or hour of time, follow up with an email so that it's not lost, and possibly set up with another meeting. And that's it. And at this point, we are open to questions. And this is the point where I hope I didn't mute my mic for like 20 minutes.
Thank you, Mike, for this fascinating presentation. So let's wait for the questions. There is one attendee raising hand. Let's see if there is a question, or is it just a mistake to raising hand? Okay, it's permitted, but he's not asking, so okay. So I guess it's...
But good etiquette by putting your hand up.
I guess it's so good that everyone got everything they need.
Oh, that's good.
Yes, it's really important to know the why behind all the meetings, so that we know the value and what we aim for. So it was really inspiring and helpful.
The thing I find with this is if you don't basically do this well, your problems drag on forever and ever and ever and ever. So once you get those complex problems, they will never go away. You can fit 1,001 simple problems, yeah, but you're never going to crack into those things because people aren't bringing the right information, and and people aren't coming together. And the amount of times I said, oh, I found something like, oh, we sent you information about this 2 weeks ago, and it just wasn't followed up on, or it's just it was an email that didn't make sense, or didn't it just, that real-time interaction. If something matters and it's a complex problem, bringing everyone together in an area to explore it, done ideally, but also putting a framework for how we solve it, rather than just this impossible ping pong.
Yes, and if I can share something from experience, this is also crucial when we speak about distributed environments, because written language in different cultures can be misinterpreted in a wrong way. But when people are gathered together, you minimize the possibility of somebody not getting the correct impression and how can I say, to understand what we're talking about. So I think it's
I get it as well. I mean, language can be a barrier when it's not your first language. And I say this as a as a master's student in Germany, where we would sometimes talk about our data, and people would get rather excited in German, and it's just like, "Whoa, can we draw this? Because I'm losing, you're losing me here." And just being able to draw, showing a problem visually is kind of a universal language all of its own.
Exactly.
And if you can allow me to show myself, because thank you so much. I have a question to Mike, if we have time.
Yeah, sure. We have a few minutes.
I think we have. So thank you, Mike, for the session. It was really nice. Frankly speaking, what we do about facilitation is most often we teach it to agile coaches, for instance, because most of the people think that it is convenient to give that skill to those people. But in my opinion, like you, I think this should be a skill of every person in the software development life cycle, even everyone in working in any field, from my perspective.
So examples could be a really tricky bug, that no one can kind of work with. I think I didn't mention as well, multiple vendors is always a nightmare as well when you're trying to work out which vendors got this problem with.
Yeah, I totally agree. And but I don't see any training at all delivered to testers. We are expecting good communication skills from those people. We hire them by their communication and maybe facilitation skills, but we don't really invest on that zone. So what do you think? My question would be, do you think facilitation in general terms should be delivered to every person in every company with a default structure or outline, or can it be tailor-made on a tailor-made approach, could be customized into software testing? Because testing, as any other job, has its own characteristics and dynamics and flow and communication. So do you think that if there is a facilitation for software testers training, should it be something than a normal or generic facilitation training?
Good question. I can tell you how I tend to just teach it within my team by giving people the opportunity and mentorship, and also kind of putting a glass wall. So sometimes I'll have facilitated a meeting, and I will kind of bring together some of my team and said, here are some of the things that I was trying to juggle in that meeting, just to show them the why. Sometimes I'll give them the opportunity to lead a session, and I'll be in there and I'll be ready to kind of help if things get a little bit messy, and we'll kind of debrief things like that. I think one of the problems is facilitating is one of those things that you can learn a lot of theory about, and it really does help. That's why this book is so great, but you also have to do it. A bit like software testing, all the theory in the world is really helpful, but actually just getting it, rolling up your sleeves and doing it is also very, very helpful. And I think it's a blend of the two, having training but also having support while doing. There's a whole other model I do about that, but basically how there's kind of like three pillars to how I think we learn, one of which is through mentoring, one of which is through pure training, and one of which is opportunity. And you need to have a blend of these things, particularly with something that's so hands-on as facilitation, to kind of really like shore up. Theory is great, practice is also important, and you just got to get a balance between the two.
We also have a question from the Q&A part. Martin Kolek asks, do you suggest there should be design facilitator, or everyone should know how to do it? How to rotate facilitators?
Oh, another good question. I think some people naturally are drawn to it and naturally good at it, which always helps. But there's a lot of training that you can do to get better. I was pretty lousy at it, I would say, to start with, and I've been learning and growing to be a little bit better. I don't think necessarily everyone in a software team needs to be able to do it, but as many people as can is kind of good, because it helps. It helps this kind of like spread the load. Because let me just tell you, I work an 8-hour day, and if I've got 5 or 6 hours of running meetings as a facilitator, or where I'm an active participant, it is exhausting. It is absolutely exhausting, and you do want to share the load. We had a workshop about this time last year, and there was a couple of things where I said, look, I need to not be the facilitator for this, because I've got some vested interest that I want to represent, and I can't do that as the facilitator. So he found someone suitable to kind of take the reins from him. I think that's us. We're done. And you are probably ready for the next amazing talk. It won't be named talks.
Yes, thanks you. Thank you so much for
Thank
supporting us and for being here, for your valuable information and presentation, Mike. It was so great to meet you here. And
Been good to be here.
yes, thank you.